Hello and welcome back to week 3 of MLQ Replay. I'm Ethan Sturm alongside Nick Jablonski. We're here to break down all the action from what was I'd say slightly surprisingly exciting weekend of quad ball. Two really good series when all was said and done. We're here to talk it out. Nick, me and you got to not be at a series this weekend. We were just watching from our couches, and there was a lot of good quad ball to be watched.
Yeah, it's been a long time since I've watched as just a fan. And I have to say that it was really, really fun, and we picked a great weekend not to travel, Ethan.
Yeah, for sure. So we're going to talk about both series as we get into it, starting with our series of the week between New Orleans Curse and San Antonio Soldados, and then the Ottawa Black Bears and the Washington Admirals. But before we start, I feel like the two of us watching these series had a specific topic we wanted to rant a little bit about. Nick, I'll let you take it away.
When are teams going to figure out optimal flag runner on pitch strategy? I mean, at this point now, you've made a video on it. We've worked on it for years. It's been a thing that teams, I think, continue to do at a subpar pace all throughout the league, whether it's buying time for your seekers by slowing down the quad ball game or pressing the pace of the quad ball game to try and score heavily. Teams are trying to split the difference way too much, and it's definitely leading to some serious issues.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're overcomplicating even. I mean, when is somebody going to set a screen in the flag runner on pitch game? That's what I want to know. I mean, Boston Forge won the 2019 championship in large part by setting screens in flag runner on pitch scenarios. And watching some of these games, I mean, this Ottawa team, who, as we're about to talk about, hung with a good Washington team for 3 games. Their flag runner on pitch strategy was try to have one player run through 4 people, and that's not how it works in MLQ. People make their tackles, especially a team like Washington. Washington makes its tackles, and you need to get in some way getting going with a head of steam if you are going to put points on the board. If you're just going to run into a brick wall over and over and over again, you're not going to trade points with the other team. We saw it, I think, from San Antonio at times too. New Orleans started running away with a couple of those games. Game 3 before the grab for San Antonio, it was all New Orleans in the flag runner on pitch situation. These teams are all athletic enough that if you're just using basic pick and roll fundamentals, you're going to be able to put points on the board if there's no beaters in the game.
Yeah, and we see so many good and interesting offenses throughout the league, all throughout. The fact that so many teams continue to take this simple situation, right? It becomes effectively a basketball game at some level, right? You could steal so many opportunities and so many ideas from basketball in the flag runner on pitch scenario when all the beaters are at the flag runner. And these teams just don't seem to be doing that really, really well. And it's super frustrating to watch.
Yeah. So that would be my my hope for the rest of the season. Let's see some screens in flag runner on pitch. But yeah, let's actually get into the games because, like we said, there was a lot of good quad ball, and we will start with our series of the week, which was probably, I would say the instant classic of the early regular season. Played in the scorching New Orleans heat. Came down to game 3. New Orleans won game 1, 145-90. I think the first time they ever beat the Soldados. Someone can check me if I'm wrong, and then the Soldados, backs against the wall, playing 2 really tight games, come up 135-70 in game 2, and then trailing in a flag runner on pitch situation with, as we were just talking about, it being all New Orleans in the quad ball game, come away with the grab, facing dominance in the beater game over there as well, to knock off the Curse 155-130. It was a really interesting dynamic in this game, Josh. I felt like it was really the beater game against the quad ball game. What did you see in this series?
Yeah, I saw you. Did you mean me there? I know we have Josh coming up soon, Ethan. I think you meant me. I mean, New Orleans came out the more strategic team, which is not surprising. And it seemed like their first line really had it down, whatever that's their strategy to sort of attack specific defenders on the San Antonio side, slow it down, conserve dodgeball control, and use that to play defense. Because I think we learned something this weekend, and it's that this San Antonio team can't handle playing in the half court very well. And the second you slow them down and the second you force them to play out of transition, that Jay Stewart speed kind of goes away a little bit, I think. I think Not that he's not a great player, obviously, but it was honestly definitely a slower weekend this weekend for him. A lot fewer transition opportunities and a lot fewer opportunities on that end. Plus, they weren't really making their hits on defense, the San Antonio team, I think, compared to what we thought they would be. But they did enough to hang around and to get the wins they needed when it all came down to it.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a little harsh. I mean, we've seen the San Antonio team run a half-court offense. I think New Orleans did a good job of keying in on what they did really well, which is trying to take Jay Stewart out of the game. And I mean, one play I remember specifically, they had set up Jay Stewart behind the hoops, or at X, as some people call it. And as soon as the ball went back to him, Pucciarelli went flying out to him, streaming out to him, took the tap beat even after the pass, just got him out of the play. Make other people beat you. And, at times I think David Avila did a good job of beating people in those situations. But the other issue that was kind of hurting New Orleans sometimes is that San Antonio was able to get some second chance opportunities. Their athleticism and their kind of will to get to the ball, off a missed shot, off a good beat. They were the first ones to that loose ball, and that kind of made some of the difference. Because in the beater game, I do think it was very one-sided, and I think and this shouldn't be surprising to anybody at this point, but I mean the way Josh Mansfield was able to take over this series for massively large amounts of time. Going through the stats, which, just so everyone knows, me and Nick are a little limited on stats this week. They're going to be up on the website the next day or so, but we only have access to kind of the raw stats right now. But just talking really quickly about Mansfield, average dodgeball is 1.69, +8 in a series that his team, I think, got outscored in the quad ball game, and 7 stops. I mean, those numbers are the kind of numbers that we were seeing from like Austin in a series that they were winning by 100-something points. It was when he was on the pitch, the San Antonio beaters were completely stifled. And I think that's a lot of why this New Orleans team was able to hang. And I mean, shout out to his partners as well. Like we said, Petrelli played a good series. Kneeling played a good series. But, when New Orleans was kind of on, it was so much because of their beaters. And I thought a lot of their quad ball players we've seen, strong performance from the past, kind of had down days overall.
Yeah, I do think they struggled a little bit. I think if you gave them the opportunity, they would pay a lot of money for a couple of those buckets back on their end. But I think that the ideas were sound when they were executing them, and when they got away from them is when they really struggled. I think that this is a team that, as they come together, it is an older team. It is a team with a lot of people, but Ben Mertens, as head coach, is new to this program. And we could definitely see some of the DCQC style ideas that Ben Mertens is taking and bringing into this team to help them. And as long as he continues to install those, I think they're going to be just fine. Like, I think this is arguably the floor of this New Orleans team this year. Is this the way they're playing this series? I mean, Josh was everywhere on this field. There were times where Josh was in San Antonio's keeper zone and looked to be the most confident beater there. There wasn't anything they could do to get rid of him a lot of the times, and he played phenomenally in flag runner on pitch scenarios too, even if the grabs don't necessarily show the otherwise.
Yeah, but occasionally, he'd be in that zone, and maybe the quad ball player wouldn't just kind of walk in the lane that was open to them. I think that's the thing this team needs to piece together. We've seen better from PJ Mitchell. We've seen better from Charlton Trammell, and hopefully, we can see them, kind of take these steps as the season goes on. On the Soldados side, though, I mean, something we've talked a lot about, both on the show and I think privately, is quad ball is really kind of a sport of, teams that win and teams that don't win. And when those things get tight, it always seems to be the same teams that are winning. And, that's something you can definitely say about a lot of this Austin core, this Cab core over the years. They're a team who knows how to win. This Soldados core, I mean, every time, whether they're, with their UTSA team or with this San Antonio team so far this season, every time backs against the wall, the KC game 2 of the KC series, going down 0-1 in this series, the national finals matchup. I mean, they have consistently found a way to win. You can tell, kind of watching them down the stretch of that last game and the way they kind of celebrated together. This is a team that's kind of been through the ringer and keeps finding ways to get those victories.
Yeah, I mean, they're definitely a team that's figuring out how to win at each of the levels, right? I think that they took a lot from the USQ Nationals run to take that. With the loss from Rutgers on day one, they came back and had a strong run back on that end, obviously winning the title. And then they're continuing to sort of figure it out on this end, right? We talk about the beater dominance of New Orleans. How many teams do you see lose those games when the beater dominance seems that drastic, as we both thought it was, to continue that way? And that's a really impressive thing from their end. I do worry about this team a little bit over a long day. Like, I think there's a big difference between a day 2 of USQ Nationals and a long day of day 1 into day 2 of an MLQ series. Like, Jay Stewart was playing almost every minute of every game to try and didn't even seem to play any seeker at this time. And that does bring me some concerns. What do you think about that, Ethan?
Yeah, I mean, it's why it's going to be so important for them to finish top 2 in the South, assumedly, 2, assuming Austin's going to be 1. And, avoid having any of those long days. This team doesn't want to have to play through the play-in bracket of MLQ championships. They want to play a series Saturday night where they're favorites and then walk into Sunday pretty fresh and try their luck in a semifinal. And I mean, if they're in a final, I think that's gravy for this young squad, who I think a lot of people were considering a rebuilding year for San Antonio. But, as much, praise as we did give Mansfield for his performance, it is a little worrisome. KC didn't have that beater. New Orleans had Josh, but also doesn't have the strongest quad ball game. What is this team going to look like when they're facing, a Boston beater core with an actual quad ball game, an Austin beater core with a real quad ball game? Is that going to be the Achilles heel that's going to kind of hold the San Antonio team back?
I think my biggest concern, I mean, do we think this team can hang with an Austin? The answer is probably not. Do we think this team can hang with a New York? The answer is probably not. Again, we're going to talk about Washington in a minute, but like, this Washington beater core didn't necessarily have the most shine on them this weekend. But like, I still think that they're going to be a team with a beater core that's going to dominate a San Antonio, and they have the quad ball core to carry along it. Like, I don't think we need to see these top echelon beater cores against this team. I think we need to see a team with a serious plan and a competent beater core, and that's going to be your issues. Like, I think that the floor, the ceiling for the San Antonio team is a little bit lower than those questions that you're asking.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't really thought through the permutations of how it would happen. I would love to see a Washington-San Antonio matchup at championship. It'd be really fun. I think that'd be a really, really fun series. So I don't know how likely it is, and obviously we don't know where anybody's going to fall yet. And obviously I think the South Division is going to get really interesting, and this KCLC series coming up this weekend is going to say a lot about where these teams are going to fall. But yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Do you have anything else you want to add about the series?
No, I'm excited to get into our interview.
Awesome. So let's bring in our interview. Assistant coach and beater for the New Orleans Curse, Josh Mansfield. Josh, thanks so much for taking the time.
Hey, thanks for having me. I apologize for the car setting here. I'm sitting outside practice, about to lace up and go in after this. But, yeah, happy to talk to y'all.
We appreciate the dedication. So, you guys got to see this San Antonio team before playing them because they did have that one series against KC. Kind of watching that series and breaking it down, were you guys feeling pretty confident coming into the series?
Yeah, I would say this is definitely the most competent New Orleans has come in, specifically against the San Antonio team, but honestly just into the start of the season. I think a lot of things have been clicking this year that haven't in years past, that just feel really good together as a team. Even if we're not even if our roster isn't necessarily as deep as it's been in past years, I think the pieces we have and the players who have been showing up have been really kind of clutch and fit together nicely. Getting to see San Antonio was kind of a double-edged sword. Certainly we kind of identified, just looking at their film against Kansas City, we really wanted to slow them down in transition, was kind of goal number one for us, which I think we were mostly able to do. And then, like y'all were kind of mentioning, our second note was getting on loose balls, which is something that San Antonio really excelled at. And we we noted on film, a little easier to see than to stop, I think, in certain plays. Certainly, I think we were doing better at it game one. And then just kind of as the series went on, San Antonio was able to outgrid and kind of get a few second chances on offense that maybe shouldn't have been there, and a few, stopped plays on defense where on a lot of 50-50 balls that went their way. but yeah, on the other hand, this San Antonio team really came in playing hot. This team has essentially not slowed down. A lot of their core just played at USQ Nationals, just won USQ Nationals, is coming off a successful series against Kansas City. You could really tell on the pitch that this team had that energy and momentum behind them that, was certainly challenging to play against at times, especially given a lot of this New Orleans core really hasn't played together since in an official match since last August at MLQ Championship.
Yeah, and we talk about sort of the age of this New Orleans core and sort of the veteran presence of this. Can you speak to how Ben Mertens has come in and kind of galvanized that team as a whole and sort of brought it together? Because like as an alum of the New Orleans Curse programs, I think this is one of the most focused teams we've seen in a long time.
Yeah, it's. I was very excited learning Ben was moving here just because, I think New Orleans is very much an insular community. There's not a lot of like come and go of players throughout the years. And so just having a fresh pair of eyes to kind of come in at our offense and try and, bust things up, change things around has been nice. I was happily surprised by a lot of what we were doing kind of meshed with the style that Ben kind of wanted to play. And so I think we've benefited from, we haven't massively dropped new strategies on our whole player base all at once, but kind of continued developing, especially in our chaser game. But also I think where Ben has really helped shine is gluing our chaser and beater game together, even if it wasn't quite there, this weekend, in our first series. I think we're have things in motion that I'm really excited for and would love to start seeing come together later in the season.
Josh, question I've been asking everybody, with these new no reset rules, kind of how has New Orleans been kind of trying to apply that in practice, if at all, and how do you think it affected this weekend's game, if at all?
Yeah, so I think the if at all is a good question there. I think it's something that we are going to drill pretty heavily tonight. I think on the offensive side of the ball, we probably had a few unforced errors just because we are not used to this kind of hard reset boundary that kind of snuck up on us. And then on the defensive side, I think we weren't pressing as hard as we could have in situations, especially when we had that dodgeball superiority and we're kind of pressing that. I think we were playing maybe a little too cautious on defense where, we could have made a few presses, but, shout out to our chasers. We have been practicing that in practice, and there are a few situations where they saw those opportunities and would take them even before myself as a beater would recognize that. There's a great play where Griffin Parr, one of the beaters on our team, saw Jay Stewart at mid pitch, just whipped his bludger at him, or dodgeball, excuse me. And I was like, oh, what are you doing? Like, that's like, Jay blocked it with the quad ball, but it knocked it out of his hand and it rolled across mid pitch for the turnover. And so play stopped and we got the turnover off that. And, here I was just thinking like, oh, why would you throw your bludger from that far? But it ended up, Griffin saw the play, read it correctly, and was able to get a nice turnover off that.
We talked some about the 5-ground pitch scenario in the beater game, which you guys did overall dominate. Obviously, the catch not going your way in game 3, or game 2. But kind of what was the dynamic there, and kind of how were you feeling kind of in sync with your other beaters in that scenario?
Yeah, I think I've been working a lot with Alex Pucciarelli in the years, honestly, to this point. But I know she's always been a great beater, but this year she's stepped up kind of her conditioning. She's been doing a ton of sprints, both with me and with other people on the team. And I think it really showed after that 20 minutes. Snitch on pitch or runner on pitch has always kind of just been who wants to run more that late in the game. And I think Alex and I were able to take care of that. Just having that benefit behind us, maybe being a little bit more used to the humidity that we were experiencing this weekend, was, in my opinion, kind of the deciding factor. But certainly, I think I was able to do so much on that pitch, just having Alex behind me, having Sarah behind me in situations during, the secret floor, obviously. But yeah.
Yeah. So we know a lot of these veteran names, right? The Charlton Tramels, the Sarah Nealings, the Alex Pucciarellis. What are who are some players that you think stepped up this weekend that some of people may not know? I mean, this was a whole team effort, right? This wasn't just the starting six.
No, absolutely. Yeah, and I would like. I think our quad ball core was actually incredibly strong game one, incredibly strong during runner on pitch scenarios. This is maybe the first time ever that New Orleans has had a positive point differential during a runner on pitch scenario over the course of the series. Um, but yeah, I guess I want to give my first shout out to Nick Savino. This is his first ever MLQ series. He, started playing last year. We met him at a Mardi Gras parade, and he just, you know, jumped on the team and has kind of come along since then. But was playing really, really strong defense. Was kind of like both physically and also reading passes at kind of like what I would consider a veteran player level, and just intercepting passes that like at times I didn't even see coming, right? So his ability to kind of be in that zone, already kind of incorporate the defense that we've thrown him into, has been really inspiring. Asia Palermo is also their beater out of LSU. I think we went up, we did a scrimmage at LSU a little earlier this spring and met Asia there. I believe with the timing of COVID, they either played 1 or 2 games in USQ pre-COVID and haven't done any quad ball since, or have never, been on the pitch in a competitive game before. And so, obviously in the beater position where there's a ton of veterans running around in MLQ, that's daunting and intimidating. And even I, probably sold them short just because they really haven't played quad ball in the past 3 years, except for the past month, and they've developed so much since then to the point where they were doing incredibly during the series. And they're someone I'm really excited to play more with and see more from them as the series and future goes on. I could keep, Marcellus Lewis had a hell of a series. Charlton Tramel was clutch, especially on offense in those runner on pitch scenarios. And PJ Mitchell was just someone who's always fun to have behind your back. But yeah.
Josh, we've kind of fashioned the South Division, excluding Austin, is kind of you guys as like this kind of old veteran team, and then you've got these 3 other teams who are basically very, very young and raw. As you guys kind of look through, I mean, obviously you just hung with the San Antonio team who already swept this Kansas City team, and then League City, obviously got off to the start against Austin. We're going to learn more about them this year. Where do you guys kind of fashion yourself? Where are kind of your goals of landing at the end of this regular season?
Yeah, I mean, I think we were kind of talking at the beginning of this season. There's never been a better time for Curse to take second in the South Division. Not first would be great, but obviously, I think this Austin team, we're trying to keep our expectations reasonable with that. Obviously, this loss to San Antonio is tough, but I think taking a game off them is big for us both mentally and just logistically moving forward. I think our goal is to continue pushing, see the rest of the division is going to shake out how it shakes out. But I think this weekend's really motivated us to double down for our home League City series. And then, obviously we're traveling up to Kansas City for that super series and, having to play Austin and Kansas City kind of back to back. So that's going to be a tough series for us. We've kind of pinpointed that from the beginning of the season where that's, going to be kind of a high hurdle, but we're hitting that hopefully right at that later point in the season where I think this team will really be firing on all cylinders. So
yeah.
And
I know definitely some painful history in that Kansas City matchup, but obviously also you're going to be holding on to the 3-0 win you guys had against League City last year. So hopefully history can repeat themselves there and not the other spot.
Not to go full stats nerd on us, but New Orleans still has a winning record in Kansas City somehow as a team. So we're happy to ride those laurels until that fact changes, at least for now. So.
Awesome. All right. Well, Josh, thanks for taking the time, and we'll let you get to practice. And best of luck the rest of the season.
Sure thing. Thanks, guys. Have a good one.
Awesome. All right, we're going to jump over to our other series for the week up in Ottawa, featuring the Ottawa Black Bears and the Washington Admirals. And I think a series that a lot of people didn't expect all that much out of. I think brought a lot more than that. Game 1, Washington kind of came out and pretty comfortably won 170-85. But then we came out in game 2 and Ottawa dropped 6 goals right out the bat. I think it was 6-1 at one point in game 2. Washington had to come roaring all the way back to win 160-100. And then in game 3, it was a back and forth affair that was kind of going to come down to a flag runner grab. And in the end, Washington did make the grab. They did win 175-120. Nick, what the heck happened in the series?
I mean, Ottawa's a real team at this point. I mean, I don't think they're going to be competing necessarily for anywhere near top of the division, but they're a real team. Game 2, they run an incredible press break as their first playoff. They continue to play physical. They move the ball well. The return of some key veterans have definitely helped them sort of stabilize and build properly, I think. And they continue to be it was just a really exciting series all around, like some really awesome ball movement, really good strategy on their side. Maybe not in flag runner on pitch scenarios, as we talked about, but in general, I think they came out prepared to play against this Washington team, and they did that really, really well. It's a great showing.
Yeah, I think one of the issues they ran into last year is they struggled to even hit the floor in the beater game against these other teams in the East Division who are just so stacked in the beater game. And this year they add David Donos paired alongside Louis Charles Dupont. They were the starters for at least in most of the games in the series. And I'm not saying that the two of them are like league-wide stars, but they are solid beaters and allowed them to get on the ground against this Washington team and not just be in a situation where every offensive possession was a press. They never got to play the game. And once that happened, you start to, kind of see some of the individual performances, the first line, Alex Naftel, Emily Naftel, and Darren Bell, they were moving the ball around pretty nicely on offense. They were hitting a lot of their passes. They were finding the open player. They were driving, dishing. They went to the second line. Haley Yap was playing very, very confidently behind the hoops and with ball in hand. And, like you said, there are a lot of the same names there, but it feels like, another year, a lot of these players are still very young. And, just a couple pieces in the exact right spots where they needed them. And suddenly it just felt like a different team. And, props to them for kind of defending their home field. Obviously, they don't get a win in this series, but to go up 6-1 against a team that, took Austin to game 3 of a quarterfinal, 10 months ago is a heck of an accomplishment.
Yeah, and it was 6-1 in convincing fashion. This wasn't Washington making mistakes, if that makes sense. It was Ottawa playing with confidence and playing out in the field really, really well. I think that there was a lot of times we sort of see these teams kind of give their best shot in game 1 and sort of die down, and this Ottawa team did not do that, and that alone is incredibly commendable, right? We talk about these teams that need to learn that there are teams that win and there are teams that don't. And a lot of times those teams that don't win kind of give up going into this, right? That's sort of something that happens all the way through. And this Ottawa team just continued to come charging back every single time.
Yeah. And I think if anything that kind of let them down is that, in one aspect, I don't think they were necessarily ready to be in these situations. Strategy-wise, they kind of seemed a little lost, as we talked about earlier, flag runner on pitch. Are they going to go for a snitch grab? Are they trying to win the quad ball game? Where are their beaters' attention? So that got chaotic at times. And then, defensively, they were kind of playing a 2-2, but it was also kind of a mark at times. And basically what
All right, I think we lost Ethan there for a minute. We'll see if we get him back, but I'll speak onto this a little bit more. We saw the old Julia Bear come out in game 2. We saw Julia Bear get to her favorite spot behind hoops, catch the ball multiple times, and hit that top hoop shot she was famous for. And part of that is the fact that this team was sort of flummoxed between a 2-2 and a mark defense. With that, when that situation happens, that spot's kind of the weak spot in a 2-2 no matter what. But if you're a scrambling 2-2, it's not necessarily a great thing. And I think Julia Bear definitely helped carry this team from that spot all weekend long.
Yeah, for sure. And sorry about the technical difficulties I'm having today. I don't know what's been up with that, but appreciate Nick holding the fort down there. But yeah, and I do think, if anything, though, I am a little, if I want to put something in the gears of Washington, and it's something we talked about coming out of the New York series. I mean, it was one thing when their beaters kind of got flummoxed by, that very, very solid New York core that we were talking about. But, there were times in this game where during that 6-1 run, like we said, it wasn't the quad ball players really making mistakes. It was just a lot of plays in a row where the Ottawa beaters were just winning out over and over again on their defensive possessions, and that was allowing Ottawa to get out and run on their offensive possessions. And really, really suddenly, very quickly, it was 6-1. One, I think, really encouraging note is the return of Colin Bourne, who was nursing an injury that I think, to my knowledge, kept him out of the first series. I've been pretty high for about 12 months now that the best beater pair in the DC metro area is Colin Bourne and Diane Howard. And so I, am looking forward to seeing more of them as the season goes on. Hopefully that can create a little bit more. Because, I mean, ultimately, what we all know is that this Washington team was missing, almost 2 entire lines of their quad ball players, and very, very talented quad ball players, all world level quad ball players. And, the players that were there held down the fort, which I think really speaks to the depth of this team. We talked about Julia Barrett, and she's always going to get hers, obviously. I thought Dale Farnan had a really good series for this team as well. Right when they needed him, he was kind of that stabilizing force player who was really comfortable playing on ball and, distributing, not trying to force. And I think this team sometimes, kind of got into bad habits of trying to force too much. And one other player I think you wanted to share out was Rachel Williams. So I'll let you take the floor on her.
We'll have to ask Jules about Rachel Williams because she came out of nowhere. I mean, she was taking her space. She was super confident. She was running in transition so well. She was just constantly popping on the tape over and over again, and has definitely made a case for her to be the number 3 behind Jules and Rachel. Heald in this situation just was constantly all over the field in a great way this whole weekend, and definitely helped to stabilize some of the offensive question marks when the Washington beaters would lose. She was comfortable holding onto the ball and taking her time and figuring out where to play from there. Whereas I think that part of the reason is when you lose a dodgeball interaction is teams tend to panic, especially in this no resets era. And having a player who can understand and make the read and make the pass or make the cut to open space to receive the pass is so valuable. And I think that she just, I mean, I don't know where she's from. Jules will have to tell me, but she was amazing.
Yeah, I was kind of the same way. I was watching the film. We didn't have an announcer, unfortunately, for this series, and it was a little hard to read numbers. And I just saw this person running down the field a few times in transition, and I'm like, that's not Julia or Rachel Heald. Who's going to run this offense right now? So it was very exciting to see that for sure, and it kind of speaks to this Washington philosophy. I mean, in the New York series, it was like Shane McConaughey that we were like, who the heck is that? And then in this series, we're like, Rachel Williams, who the heck is that? This team is so deep in the quad ball game. And we just need to see a couple steps, I think, taken in the beater game as we kind of get later in the season. Obviously, Washington still got its 2 biggest games to come. I think, I think most people have New York as the favorites in the division, and most people have Ottawa at the bottom of the division. Their Boston series and their Charlotte series is going to decide, can they get that second place spot? Can they finally avoid being in the play-in games? And I think, we've got a lot to learn about this team still.
Yeah, I think they still definitely have to figure out some beater chaser synchronization issues. I think that that's part of the reason their beaters are kind of being left on an island, and then their chasers are being left on an island. And the chasers are good enough to play out of that island. But the game's a lot simpler when your timing's on and when you can continue to interact together. And we saw some of those moments, right? I broke down some of them on an episode of The Breakdown where the beater chaser synchronization was really on point. And if they can get to that point and play fast while being at that point, this team is scary.
Yeah, for sure. Anything else you want to say about the series before we move on to our next guest?
I do want to sort of touch on the flag runner question marks I think that we see with this Washington team. I think the fact that I believe they only had 1 grab the whole weekend, or none.
No, yeah, the game winner in game 3.
And they had none in the New York series. So I think we're starting to,
yeah.
Sorry, the 1 TJ grab. That's right. And TJ wasn't here, so TJ is the answer to that question, I think. But it is something I think we do have to. You talk about with beaters, right? Beaters are as much a part of that flag runner game as the seekers, and I think that as they get deeper and deeper into the bracket, these games are consistently going to come down to flag runner grabs. And if the beaters and seekers can't figure that out, then their season might end a little bit early.
Yeah. And I mean, that T degenerate grab did come on like the only opportunity he got. He caught immediately. And I think New York had a bunch of shots before that in that particular game. But yeah, so let's jump on to our interview with Washington Admirals chaser Julia Bear. Julia, thanks so much for taking the time tonight.
Thank you for having me. How are you guys?
We're good. So I want to start with just kind of, it's the first time talking to someone from the team this year, kind of a general thoughts. Obviously we mentioned a little earlier, the quarterfinals lost to Austin, the really competitive series you guys played on that Saturday night. What were kind of the team goals kind of entering the season after kind of, that high, but not necessarily probably as high as you guys wanted it to be?
Yeah, so this team is still trying to figure out its own potential, I think. We, going into the New York series, had very limited practices with the full roster around. And so I think some of the chemistry has been a little delayed in developing. And then similarly, we kind of had a shorthanded roster with this Ottawa roster. But regardless of all those things, we're looking to make a deep run at the championships. And we're looking, as you guys mentioned, to get that spot, second place in the East, if not first, although I think first is impossible at this point, statistically. But yeah, we're really hoping to avoid that play-in because we think that we're better than it, and we think that we can certainly accomplish it this year. I know, Josh talked earlier about how the curse is going to be kind of building as the season goes on, and we're only going to get stronger. We have a whole month of practice ahead of us. Before our Charlotte series, we're going to have that amazing pickup of the Australian beaters, Nathan and Nicola, that are going to come later on as well. I believe they're going to be around for our Boston series. And, we have a couple injuries and things that are getting cleared up. And so I'm feeling really good about the rest of the season, but we're definitely, full speed ahead looking for the next series.
Awesome. So obviously you guys, we've mentioned a little bit roster short this weekend. That being said, did Ottawa kind of come out and surprise you guys at all this weekend?
Yeah, I think game one went the way we thought it would. I think we felt pretty comfortable in game one. And, one thing that Tyler and I talk about is historically the Admirals are struggle in game two. In the past couple seasons, we've, done pretty well in game one, and then sometimes game two is a terrible game, and then game three is okay. And so I think we might have just come out a little too cocky. I think their beaters adjusted really, really well, recognizing that we had a smaller chaser line, and that if they could distract our beaters and get them out of the play, then their chasers could really kind of outmuscle us and make those hustle plays. But yeah, I mean, Ottawa, they came to play, and I thought that they did great.
Awesome. So I believe you guys used your timeout at either 6-1 or 4-0, somewhere around that point in the game. So kind of what was the vibe on the sideline, and kind of what did you guys do to turn that game around?
Yeah, so Coach Keegan, shout out Coach Keegan, who's our non-playing head coach this year, which is huge for us. Basically just told us to settle down. He was like, you guys are, rushing into things. Let's take it easy. Let's settle the beaters. Let's see if we can't get bludger control. Let's just make our passes and move the ball around and play our game. We had a great first game. We know that we're the better team, and just settle. And, as soon as that happened, we started to kind of, calm down a bit, set our feet on our passes, stop rushing so much, and ultimately came back and took that game. So.
Hey, Julia.
Hi, Nick.
All right. We talked about her before, but I need to ask you, who is Rachel Williams?
A star. Are you kidding me? She's awesome. Okay, so Rachel Williams, I cannot say enough good things about her. She is, I mean, you guys have said it before, she's really confident with the ball. She's got great fundamentals. I believe she played on DCQC this past year, but I don't think she's played much before that. I think this is like her first or second year playing the sport. And she really is just like so talented. She's got really quick feet. She's got quick hands. She makes the cut exactly when you need her to. And she has this crazy innate sense of spacing. It's something that I, as a coach in the past, have really struggled to teach in this sport about, when to make the cut, when to pull out, when you need to be an option on the wings versus when you need to be penetrating. And it's just something that she understands. And she's also incredibly coachable. She listens so well. She is a great teammate. I can't say enough good things. That was her MLQ debut, and I think she got like 3 or 4 in her first game. Like, absolutely incredible, and she's just getting started.
Awesome. Julia, something we kind of noticed in the New York series, seemingly by choice, and then kind of probably in this Ottawa series, forced by the absences of players. Compared to the past Admirals teams that kind of seem to have more set lines, there seemed to be a lot of kind of mixing and matching in terms of who was playing with who in the quad ball game at every given point, less so in the beater game. But has that kind of been a concerted effort, and kind of what's, to your knowledge, kind of the reasoning behind that within the team?
I believe that's a symptom of the fact that we've just had a really, really rough first month of practice attendance. Part of it is my fault. I mean, Tyler and I missed the first 4 practices on our honeymoon. So that, was a big, that was the first 4 practices of the whole season when, standards were being set and precedents were being set and lines were starting to form. And so I think that was really tricky. Right now, we're just trying to figure out, who works best with who and trying to integrate some of these newer players into that line. I think you guys mentioned earlier, Shane McConaughey is a rising star, and getting him more involved in the quaffle game as much as possible is something that we're really committed to as well. I do think that we're going to pursue lines moving forward. I really think we're just looking forward to having some repetition over the next month and trying to figure out what those lines are going to look like. Because in New York series, the lines had, Tyler, myself, and Rachel all split up, which is fine, but it's something I'm definitely not used to. And so I'm still trying to also figure out how to work with some of these new people, like John Gaffigan, for example, who is another great addition to the team.
Yeah, so we've kind of been talking about that next up mentality. Any other players you kind of want to give shout out or their dues for kind of the performance they had this weekend?
1,000,000%. Adrian Koretsky, Adrian Sticky Hands Koretsky. I'm obsessed with them. They are a product from Brandeis, star in the Massachusetts Quad Ball Conference. I'm sure you guys are more than familiar. I was so excited to see Adrian on this roster, and they've been matched up with Robert Rice, who was on practice squad last year and got the call up this year. I thought they had an incredible series. Every time I turned around, they had bludger control or dodgeball control up in the offensive zone, tapping out wing chasers, just so confident. And so I think that they are a force to be reckoned with for sure. I'm really, really proud of Adrian for how they've kind of stepped into this MLQ meta really confidently. And I know there was one play against New York where I don't even know who it was. Someone, like maybe it was Tate, like fully wound up, like point blank, and Adrian absorbed it like nothing and just like booked it. Can't say enough good things about Adrian and Robert. And also, I'm just really happy with our female tracer core. Like, having Jeanette on the team is huge. She's a great player. She's recovering she got hit by a car recently, but she still came out and I think dropped like 3 or 4 goals in Ottawa as well. Julie Neutzel's always an incredible defensive presence. Julia Rankin has an amazing shot. We also, obviously, we have Rachel Heald as well. We got Liz Stone and Rachel Williams. Like, the list goes on and on. And so I was really excited. I know that our roster was kind of short this past weekend, but I was really excited to be able to get a lot of minutes with a lot of those girls. Because, they get buckets, and I just love playing with them.
For sure. And yeah, I love the Adrian Koretsky shot as well, because it's really been great seeing them in kind of a new environment. We've kind of only gotten to see them playing that Brandeis system because I think they've only been practice squad Boston before, and I think they have been showing up in these first 2 series. As you're talking about, you guys have your big 2 series to come. Coming out of that tough New York series and kind of this weird Ottawa series, do you feel like morale's up, or are you guys feeling confident coming into those 2 big series?
Yeah, I think we're feeling good. I think we had a lot of challenges coming into this series. Like a couple of us bought turf shoes from Dick's Sporting Goods on the way up to Canada because the field inside required turf shoes. And so we were breaking in new cleats as we were playing with our limited roster after driving 9 hours. Like we had every reason to have excuses as to, why things didn't go well. And I just think we're a really resilient group. But looking forward, I think we're pumped to be able to bring fuller rosters to these two series, and we're feeling really confident, especially going into that Boston series. I think they're a team we're super familiar with. I know Charlotte's a slightly different team this year than they have been in the past, with a couple key losses. So we're gonna need to watch some film of that. But yeah, we're feeling good, and we're only gonna get stronger as the season goes on. And our leadership of Keegan and Riley and Colin and Rachel has been doing a great job of kind of seeing where we need to improve, such as that beater chaser communication, which is something that we're going to be focusing on for sure in the next month. So yeah, we're excited. We're pumped up, and honestly, the team is like, it's weird to say. I know historically the Admirals don't have the best vibes in the whole world. This is a really fun team. This is a really great team, and I'm having a blast hanging out with them. So we're feeling good.
Awesome. Well, Julia, thank you so much for taking the time. It's always a pleasure having you on Replay, and best of luck to you guys in the rest of the season.
Thank you both. Have a good night.
Awesome. All right. Well, that is going to do it for another edition of MLQ Replay. But before we go, just a little quick business to take care of. It's a big weekend coming up in MLQ, kind of moving weekend, if you were, because there's going to be some series that are going to have a lot of say in who's going to be in attendance at MLQ Championship this weekend. At the East Super Series, we're going to have the Charlotte-Ottawa series. Winner of that might be the fourth team that comes out of the East Division. New York also has to obviously contend with those teams as well. And then our series of the week down in Texas, League City playing host to Kansas City. Given how strong New Orleans look, this also might be a series that determines which team gets to go to MLQ Championship. So don't miss those series. Also, don't forget to check out the Patreon. Cuts by Neves is going to a weekly schedule starting this week. Episode 3 is dropping tomorrow. We also have Nick's The Breakdown series, which are great pieces as well. So please check all of that out. Thank you to Harry Clark, our producer. Thank you to both Julia and Josh for taking the time with us in their interviews. And thank you to Nick for being on the show with me. We're bringing in Jack McGovern for the rest of the season starting next week. So that's something to be hyped up about here on MLQ Replay. But yeah, thanks everybody for watching. Best of luck in your series next week, and we'll talk to you next weekend.